Good morning. I want us, first of all, to reflect on Evelyn Lemley's talk last night. Now, for those of us, a number in this room will know that over the years, we've sometimes had tetchy relationships with the licensor of the programs, which is KPMA. And the relationship sometimes has been, them protecting their intellectual property on their global ministry that we need to run with the programs that we are licensed to run. But otherwise, the relationships are good. And those of us who have attended the KPMA conferences, it's just fantastic. The Australian ministry, is loved, over there, as you could tell, with them talking last night. I was really taken by, the fact that Evelyn could give us something, so days, after the hurricane, which says something in itself. But there were things that she talked about last night that were real echoes of what I started to say last night. And that is COVID has given us an opportunity within the ministry to examine the non-program side, of the ministry. Evelyn said that they've looked at that the same as we have here in Australia. And they found loopholes, she called them. Well, what she said last night, I'm about to I looked at my script, I said, that's the first page of what I was going to say this morning. So I can start there. I'll use loopholes as well. It's not in my script, but I'll use loopholes as well. Because this opportunity that we've had to examine the unexamined side of this ministry over the last 3 years has been fantastic for us. Hard work, as I said last night. But then I said, I only saw that script about 2 days before we've come here, and I said, oh yeah, that looks good, that's okay, yep. As I watched it last night, you'll see real echoes in what I'm going to present this morning from them. Now, quite consciously, I have not gone back to talk to Evelyn because there's so much to do after the hurricane. I'll let them settle. But as soon as we can, I'll be back onto there and say, what did you find? What is this that you've done? Yep. But by then, hopefully, we'll have some video that I can send to her about what we are going to talk about today. So that's just as an early lead into this. And for the guys up the back, I'm now going on script as opposed to off script. And you'll see some real echoes in this first page. Putting together the program for this current 2022 conference has been a challenge. The impact of the COVID pandemic has been significant, with this 3-year pause in the delivery of our programs, which up until now have been the primary reason for our existence as a ministry. The pause has provided an opportunity for 3 years of reflection, analysis and review of those areas of the ministry which have not been appreciated over the previous decades. I call those areas the non-program side of the ministry. I'm sure we're talking about the same things with KPMA. As a result, I believe we, the board, have found a new clarity around a strategy for the ministry focused on support for regions and the fastest return to programs that we can achieve. The strategy itself is not very complex. And in the process of developing the strategy, we have gained new insights into the ministry, which will help us rebuild for the next decade and beyond, not just to get going again. This conference for us and what we're presenting is directed first to getting back the programs, but everything we've done over these 3 years has also been looking for the future and understanding some new perspectives for us, and some of us have been here for a long time, new perspectives on what this ministry is about. Post-COVID success requires more than just a return to pre-COVID ideas. Today's sessions explore the differences in that statement and why they are a necessary context for the more important workshop sessions that you're going to go into tomorrow. Now, the conference and this overview session is titled The Keys to Success. Now, we can identify and think we've identified 5 key steps for success. Firstly, understand who we are and what we do, understand where we've been and where we are now, identify the problems, create a strategy for success, and then successfully implement that strategy. Simples. When we have explored 1 to 4, we're going to take a short break in this session, have a song, have a stretch, and then we'll move on to number 5 before we go to morning tea. Session 3, after morning tea this morning, addresses key elements in the strategy in the form of a single database for the ministry as an essential element in creating the post-COVID Kairos. Session 4, after lunch, looks at some of the projects, not fully completed, but illustrate aspects of the strategy and how they can be implemented. Just a few quick comments before I get into that material. I want to emphasise we are an overtly Christian ministry. As we sing, we pray, devotions. I'll talk a bit more about these comments. I just want to make a couple of comments about the future of Torch. Much of what we're going to look at today will be just as relevant to a non-Christian entity as it is to us. In my terminology, we would describe this morning as more head stuff rather than heart stuff. But that doesn't go in any way to diminish our commitment as a ministry and as a board to the work we have been called by God to do, or the need for prayer in all that we do. A successful ministry needs to succeed with both the head and the heart. Our relationship with God through Jesus is paramount. And even when we're addressing head-type issues, which we're going to be doing here, mainly through today and particularly this morning, never forget, as Jesus told his disciples, and he was speaking to all of us as well, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. And I always keep coming back to that. Apart from me, you can do nothing. On one occasion, I went back and I went into Bible Gateway and I said, oh, look at all the translations and what do the translations say, just to make sure. Nothing, zip, nothing, can't do anything. Absolutely unequivocal. No translation problems. Without me, you can do nothing. You'll see as we progress that it has been our lack of attention to some of the head stuff pre-COVID that might have been our loophole, as Levinson. I can't wait to get to talk to her, again in a couple of weeks to see whether that is what they have discovered, the same as our board has discovered here. I suspect so. The first of those steps that I referred to, who are we and what do we do? It did not take much analysis to uncover that many of our problems were not in the actual process of training, team formation and the running of the programs that are done in the regions. Sure, we know things can be done better. We know there's issues of clearances and those sorts of things. And some of those issues, not clearances, but Deb and Rob Rodenberg will be talking in our session about some of those things tonight. But the volunteer recruitment problems and the lack of leaders for regions and states have been unaddressed for a number of years, while programs have been our preoccupation. And much of what we, the directors, have been addressing over the past 3 years is in this non-program area, as I said last night. And one of the outcomes that's already taken place from that attention is the launch of the Regional Committee Handbook, which required a huge amount of work from a number of people to bring together all the policies that were spread around into one particular location. And we're grateful that we've been able to get that out. In broad terms, the non-program areas, as I refer to them, are the support functions to the regions who run the program function. That support can come from many different levels. It comes from the board, might come from the Kairos Support Office, it might come from state councils, it might come from state regions. It ranges from strategy and direction for the ministry from the top through compliance, through training in many ways, and the provisions of a fit-for-purpose system support for regions that facilitate simple and good communications within the ministry. Our post-COVID plans primarily address these non-program issues. Why? To provide better support to the regions. Let me give an example of what I'm talking about in that area. If I could have the next slide. When we're operating within any organisation, we don't think much about how we sit relative to other organisations in a similar structure. However, when we commenced looking for new database software, we needed to assess the options which ranged for us from very large systems for very large organisations down through medium to small organisations. Now, there's more on this on session 3 after morning tea. Now, there's another area for us in relation to size, which I'll just refer to. The regulator of Kairos Prison Ministry is the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profit Commission, or ACNC as we refer to it. And they divide the people that they regulate into large, medium and small groups. And Kairos, on this scale, is right on the line between small and medium, Kairos by a regulator. So we're either small, medium or we're a large, small. You can take your pick depending on what circumstances we're talking about. But this size of our organisation has implications for a number of things about our future strategy, and I'll be coming back to that. The next, or the third idea that I want to just reflect on, now this will sound very esoteric, so just bear with me until I explain this. Our volunteers deliver the service. Now, that doesn't mean much, but I want to go to this next slide to explain what I'm referring to here. This is one of the learnings that we've had. I haven't got a pointer, so I'm going to have to refer to what sides and things that I'm talking about here. This is a simple schematic which illustrates the types of volunteer organisations that exist in that area where software is provided. Points A and B represent the role that volunteers play in different types of volunteer organisations, or I'm calling a not-for-profit organisation. The most common not-for-profit is in the option B. The volunteer is recruited primarily to assist that not-for-profit raise funds. They run events, they set up fund runs, they organise all sorts of collections. That's what the volunteers do in most volunteer organisations. And armed with the funds that those volunteers raise, the not-for-profit then employs people or it contracts people to deliver services to the recipients. Think of medical charities. They have volunteers that raise money for it, breast cancer or whatever. The money goes to the not-for-profit and then the not-for-profit spends it corporately. The option A, which is less common by far, is where the volunteer is engaged in the actual delivery of the service to the recipient. In our case, we are option A. The volunteer's role in Kairos is on the short course of the weekend, and they are dealing with the delivery of the actual service. Now, the biggest issues for option A organisations are ensure that the volunteers are adequately trained, which is something we do in team formation. And you've got to be careful about how we train to deliver the service. But you need a clear and a strong culture to maintain compliance in your relationships with those who are receiving the service. There's an extra dimension for us around the vulnerability of the people receiving the service. We know that the guests in KO, people inside, men and women, are vulnerable communities that we're dealing with. That's an extra dimension for us. We need to take special care. So the takeout for option A organisations is that they're more complex than those of for option A's. They're more complex than those of option B. So we're saying, as a reminder, we're small, but we're more complex. And that has been a fundamental area of new learnings for us as an organisation. It came from when we started to think about the software we needed, but it starts, when you think about it more, it starts to permeate so much more of our thinking about who we are and what we might need to do and maintain in terms of success. So there's some new perspectives, in relation to the work we've been doing. So what have we learned from these additional perspectives in the work that we've been doing? Well, most of the problems are on the non-program side. I've already referred to that. I've mentioned Kairos is small, but we're complex. We need simple systems that support the regions that can help them manage the complexity. The regions are dealing with complexity. We can help with that complexity by simple systems. We must maintain high standards in the training of leaders, in team formation training, but we also need to pay more attention to non-program leadership and management training within the organisation. So they're the new learnings that have come out of this period of time. These are the things I want to check with Evelyn. What have they learnt from the time that they have spent reviewing their organisation? That's the first key to success. So, what have we learnt out of the second one? Understanding where we've been and where we are. Now, to do this, to understand where we've been and where we are, the best place to go is look at the number of programs that we have completed over the last 3 years. Since we started. This is sort of new stuff, and we put this together in terms of helping the board understand where we've been and where we are. Now, there's not enough time to explore all the history since the first program was run in Parramatta in 1995, but here are the key takeaways from the history of Kairos Prison Ministry Australia. We had amazing growth up to 2010, based heavily on New South Wales in KI, and where those of us around know we're running 2 programs a year in the jails that we're in. In 2010, KI lost 3 prisons due to New South Wales Corrective Services restructuring and relocating some of the Sydney, or starting a process of relocating prisons out of the Sydney area into the regions. That took place over the next decade. And for a number of us moving to 1 program a year instead of the 2. Now, you can see we did not grow, essentially, between 2010 and 2020. If you look, and I haven't got a pointer to show you, but just before, where it turns over, just before it drops down to the COVID, COVID did not start that turning over. Before it dropped to 0, we already were losing a number of programs. So these issues that I'm talking about started pre-COVID, and we can identify them as being pre-COVID issues. COVID just made the situation worse. You can see the bottom in 2020. There are positive signs in 2022, where we are at the moment, and for 2023 as well. But after that, where COVID goes, those question marks, is largely up to us. Now, I know getting into jails and so on, but jails will come back. They're coming back now. We're positive now, if we can feel confident, things are coming back. But where did we go after that? Have we got plans to do better than we did in 2010 and between 2010 and 2020, when we just stabilised? And some of our problems started to magnify. Is it possible to repeat the experience of the first decade? Amazing growth. And the one that we're going to be focusing on, will we be better equipped in the post-COVID period for whatever growth is available to us? Now, a starting place with the answers is to ask, what are the problems that we need to overcome if we are to succeed in the post-COVID years? Well, Two big problems. The two overriding ones were identified in 2008 in our 5-year plan. We identified them again in the questionnaire for the 2019 National Conference. We've identified them again in the questionnaire for the 2022 conference. There is a shortage of non-program leaders from board level through states and regions, the most critical being leadership at the regional level. Of course, we all know, if the regional committee is not working, there's not going to be any programs. And second, the difficulty recruiting volunteers for KI and KO and guests, KO inside and guests for KO. Now, we tend to say these are our problems, but maybe they're not the problem. Maybe what we're looking at there is symptoms. Maybe the problems are buried a bit deeper, and that's what we've really been looking at. We know that everyone who has felt called into leadership positions, program or non-program in Kairos, over the years, and often reluctantly, has done the best that they could at the time with the resources available, and often in difficult circumstances, and sometimes difficult family circumstances even. We thank them. I want to make sure nothing I'm saying here today reflects ill on leadership that we've had at any time in the past. But I can ask the question, might we have done better in the last decade? If we had simple and online training for people who are moving into non-program leadership roles? And might we all done better if we had systems available to support them in their jobs that made their jobs simpler and easier and more attractive for someone to move into those roles that people might be reluctant to go to? There, I think, is where we're starting to see the cause of the problems rather than the symptoms that we've tended to talk about in the past. Session 4, after lunch today, looks at these issues, these specific issues, as will the workshops that Deb is organising for tomorrow. For now, in this overview session, there's one more element that I want to address. Recruitment of volunteers and guests brings into play the relationship between our internal processes and what we do internally and our relationship with the external circumstances in those communities from which we recruit. Stephen Reid, talking last night, started to open up a reflection on what's happening in those external communities from where we recruit. What do we know about and what changes are taking place in those communities? The Christian community on the whole, the denominations, the demographics of ageing within those communities, and particularly post-COVID, where significant changes have taken place. And reflecting at a lower level, what's happening in regular church attendance. We recruit regular church attenders. That's part of the definition of our recruitment. We heard just a little thing from Stephen last night. Regular church attendance is falling. And you look a little bit deeper in some areas, COVID has changed. What's a regular churchgoer nowadays? Is that someone Zooming in? Is a regular Zoomer a regular churchgoer? When we talk about who we recruit, there's issues that we really need to have a look at and have some understanding of. Stephen is also going to join us later this morning with a bit deeper dive to show and illustrate the use that we can put data to in knowledge of those external communities where we need to go for recruitment. Now, they're issues that we need to get a good grip on if we want to solve the recruitment issue for Kairos. And in session 4, I'll be reflecting particularly on a new way of looking at recruitment for KO guests, which we've spent some time on. We've started on the front end of a project here. Sue was involved in it, and there'll be some more information for you about that in session 4. So what can we make of all this work, this new perspective, can we see in here a strategy for success, post-COVID? I believe we can. The board believes we can. First, we need a clear and unambiguous goal. Right now, getting regions up and running again is that clear and unambiguous goal. The elements of strategy to achieve that goal are coordinating support to regions as they need it, all the support functions, develop leadership at all levels, especially non-program. We need modern industry standard systems support to the regions to make things simpler, to make them easier, make them more effective. To achieve those, we need some clearly defined database projects to help us understand that external environment where we go to recruit. Whether it's recruiting volunteers or guests, we've got to look more specific and use the availability of wealth of data that's available to do that. And we need an organisation structure to implement all of that. How are we going? This is pretty heavy stuff. I'm trying to crash in 3 years' work into a 20-minute presentation here. Are we still up with me? Yeah? Yeah, okay, that's good. I see some heads nodding. We're going to take, I want to take a bit of a break just so that we can all sort of get our heads about doing that before I come back and talk about the fifth point there, the organisation structure to implement the above. That's the next part of what I present.